When you become someone's emotional rehab center. One of the most damaging roles you can fall into in dating is the one that looks the most virtuous. The healer. The understanding one. The emotionally strong one. The safe place. The person who listens, absorbs, calms, repairs, explains, forgives, and stays. At first, it feels meaningful. You think you're building intimacy. You think the connection is deep because they trust you with the parts of themselves they don't show the world. They call you different. They say you get them. They open up about their past, their wounds, their fears, their confusion, their damage. And because you care, you lean in. But slowly, something shifts. You realize the relationship is becoming emotionally one-directional. They come to you when they're overwhelmed. They need your softness when they're dysregulated. They want your patience when they're triggered. They need your reassurance when they're spiraling. They rely on your emotional steadiness to hold themselves together. But when you need clarity, reciprocity, or actual relational effort, suddenly they're tired, confused, not ready, emotionally unavailable, overwhelmed by pressure. And that's when you realize something painful. You are not being loved properly. You are being used as emotional infrastructure. This is what it looks like when you become someone's emotional rehab center. Not their partner, not their equal, not someone they are building with. Just the place they go to regulate, unload, recover, and stabilize, before disappearing back into themselves. A lot of people get trapped here because the role flatters their identity. It makes them feel needed, important, rare, chosen. You start believing that your value is in how much emotional weight you can carry without dropping it, how patient you can be, how much pain you can understand, how well you can absorb someone else's brokenness without asking them to become accountable for it. And that is where the danger starts. Because once your worth becomes tied to being needed, you stop noticing whether you're actually being loved. This often comes from trauma reenactment. Trauma reenactment happens when you unconsciously repeat emotional roles that feel familiar, especially if your early experiences taught you that love meant earning closeness through care, overfunctioning, or emotional labor. If you learned that being calm, useful, understanding, or emotionally mature made you more lovable, then relationships like this can feel strangely natural. You meet someone wounded. You become the safe one. They depend on you. You feel bonded through what you carry for them. And because their vulnerability feels intimate, you mistake dependence for connection. But dependence is not the same as reciprocity. Let's make this real. Maybe you're dating someone who only opens up when they're falling apart. They disappear when they feel normal. But the second they're lonely, anxious, triggered, or heartbroken, they come straight to you. They want your voice, your comfort, your understanding, your emotional intelligence. You help them regulate. You help them make sense of themselves. And in those moments, the bond feels intense. Then once they feel better, the energy changes. They become distant again, less responsive, less available, less emotionally present, until the next collapse. Now the relationship has a pattern. They return in crisis, connect through pain, stabilize through your care, then drift once they've recovered enough. And because you experienced real closeness in the intense moments, you keep waiting for that version of them to stay. But it rarely does. Another version of this pattern is the person who constantly brings you their past, but never builds a future with you. They talk endlessly about their wounds, their exes, their trust issues, their childhood, their fear of intimacy. You understand them more deeply than most people ever will. But somehow, all that understanding never turns into better treatment. It turns into more explanation, more context, more reasons they can't show up properly, more emotional dependence without relational improvement. That's when empathy becomes a trap. Because your insight starts getting used against your standards. You say, I know they've been through a lot. You say, they're trying. You say, they need someone safe. You say, I don't want to abandon them. But there is a difference between compassion and self-abandonment. You are not cruel for noticing that someone only accesses your warmth when they need repair. You are not selfish for realizing that being emotionally useful is not the same as being emotionally cherished. And you are not heartless for refusing to become the unpaid therapist, regulator, and recovery room for someone who still cannot love you in a stable way. This is where the savior complex can quietly take over. The savior complex is not always arrogance. Sometimes it's grief dressed as devotion. You believe that if you love correctly, support deeply enough, stay calm enough, or understand them better than anyone else, they will eventually become capable of giving back what you've been pouring in. But relationships do not become healthy just because you are emotionally skilled. Your capacity does not cancel their incapacity. That sentence matters because so many emotionally intelligent people stay trapped in draining dynamics simply because they have the skills to survive them. They know how to de-escalate. They know how to communicate carefully. They know how to hold space. They know how to read wounds beneath behavior. But being able to explain someone's damage does not make you less damaged by it. And over time, this role erodes self-worth in a very specific way. Not through open rejection, through emotional imbalance. You start feeling valuable only when needed. You start feeling connected only during repair. You start waiting for their lows because that's when they let you close. You start measuring intimacy by how much of their pain you're allowed to carry. And eventually, you stop asking the simplest question of all. Do they show up for me with the same consistency I show up for them? Usually, the answer is no. That's because many people who use others as emotional rehab centers do not want mutual vulnerability. They want relief. They want somewhere safe to fall that doesn't ask them to become structurally different. They want to be understood without being transformed, supported without being challenged, held without having to hold much back. And if you are used to proving your worth through emotional labor, that dynamic will feel powerful at first. You will think, this is deep, this is special, they trust me. But what they may really trust is your willingness to keep giving without requiring enough in return. That is not intimacy. That is asymmetry with emotional language around it. The power shift begins when you stop being impressed by emotional dependence. Someone needing you at their lowest does not automatically mean they value you at your highest. Someone opening up to you does not automatically mean they are building with you. Someone feeling safe with you does not automatically mean they are safe for you. That distinction changes everything. A healthy relationship is not built on one person constantly rehabilitating the other. It is built on mutual regulation, mutual accountability, and mutual effort. Yes, people can have wounds. Yes, people can have hard seasons. Yes, partners can support each other deeply. But if the relationship repeatedly becomes a place where one person receives healing while the other receives instability, the bond is not balanced. And balanced is what your nervous system needs. So if you recognize yourself in this pattern, stop asking whether you're patient enough. Stop asking whether you're compassionate enough. Stop asking whether you can love them into readiness. Ask the harder question, who am I when I'm not being needed? Because if your identity in relationships depends on rescuing, regulating, or repairing people, you will keep mistaking emotional labor for love. And love should not require you to become someone's recovery center just to feel close. You can be empathetic without becoming absorbent. You can be loving without becoming available for emotional extraction. You can care without carrying. You can understand someone's wounds without volunteering your life as the treatment plan. The strongest version of you is not the one who can survive the most imbalance. It's the one who finally stops confusing being needed with being chosen.